Hello, this is Trade Misconception. This is the channel where we put our misconceptions on the table and we trade them for the truth. Here we like to strive for the truth. Now, let's get started. I wanted to talk about the role of policing in our society and how it is being talked about a lot more now, given the recent events of officer altercations and unjustified killings by police officers, and the growing stratification and division in our society due to these events. I wanted to discuss this whole topic of defunding the police. Now, defunding the police has become a very ambiguous term. No one can really, put a pulse on the term. Some people, say what exactly it sounds like, slashing some of the funds to the police departments, and they've been talking about diverting some of the funds to other social programs. But some calls for defunding the police have pretty much been tied to abolishing the police. Now, I wanted to get started on reading this article from thetrace.org. And they go in to discuss a little more about defunding the police in this article. Now, it says defunding the police has become a rallying cry and a policy prescription long before the killing of George Floyd. But obviously, the killing of George Floyd has ignited this rallying cry significantly, and now it's become a very well-known idea and concept to people. Even if people don't know the exact meaning behind the term, people have now been talking about this. This is well out there in the internet world and in the zeitgeist right now. In citing this article, it shows that police budgets have been a third rail of municipal government, rising so routinely that cumulative spending on state and local law enforcement now surpasses $115 billion a year. That is a significant amount of money. I'm sure in some localities that can surely be cut and diverted to other spending that can help the community and with community efforts to lower the crime in certain areas, give people more opportunities, more programs to keep the youth out of trouble. So that is a definite possibility. One of the issues I do see with this is the police have become such a large revenue generator for some of these cities, and I don't think a lot of people have been taking that into account. If the cities are talking about making reasonable cuts where they can crunch the numbers and they find that they can still address the problems in their city and police the city effectively while maintaining, I guess, some other way to get funds. They could still, decide whether they want to keep on a certain amount to generate revenue for the city in general, or, they could decide to gain the revenue in other areas that would be needed for these social programs. one thing that isn't popular with a lot of people would be to raise property taxes, probably raise sales taxes as well. That's a definite possibility on how to raise some of the revenue. I mean, it could be found that, cutting the police budget significantly wouldn't make that much of a dent, even considering the lost revenue that the police force would be bringing in. So there is that possibility as well. This really just depends on the municipality and how much they spend and how much the police overall generate in overall revenue for the municipality. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of address both angles. It seems that there's a lot of unreasonable people on both spectrums of this issue. You have one side that is calling for the complete abolition of police, and then you have another side that is saying there is absolutely nothing wrong with the police and there's no need for reform. I mean, I really can't reconcile with either one of these things because they both seem very crazy to me. Let me tackle the side that says the police don't need to be reformed. We have already seen many instances of police misconduct, bad behavior for the police officers. We know the concept of the thin blue line and, pretty much defending officers no matter how bad the behavior is. There is going to be some intimidation for officers to fall in line with this. So if someone acts in a terrible way, pretty much it makes it hard for the good police officers to call out bad behavior of their fellow officers. This is not a good culture to fester in our police departments. We need to empower these good police officers to call out the bad behavior of their fellow officers. That needs to happen. I think that it would be reasonable to look into a, sort of a 3-strike, you're out situation with officers. If there are bad situations where there was found to be very negligent misconduct on behalf of the police officers, I would just say, just for instance, 3 strikes. If they get 3 strikes against them in this realm, then they should be done with the force. At the very least, they need to be put on desk duty, never to go out there on the streets again and police the streets. I think that's a reasonable solution to help out with the problem. I would say that they definitely need to change their restraining tactics. This is evident after the George Floyd killing, that they need to do something else to restrain people. Honestly, he should have never had the knee on the back. That was just unreal. Also, another thing would be these police unions not, covering up bad behavior of their officers and fighting for them if there is a case of misconduct. I know that there's a lot of ambiguity, so this would obviously need to be ruled in a fair manner, that, this misconduct complaint was legitimate. So, but yeah, I do think that there needs to be some major reform in the way that policing is done and how it, how it disproportionately affects minority communities. So that is one thing that I don't understand. The right side of the spectrum is how the far right, or whatever you want to call them, how they can say that the police are okay the way they are and there should be no reform. I mean, we've already seen the increasing militarization of the police officers and their use of force, their dramatic use of force in situations should be concerning to every American that cares about civil liberties. Now, I wanted to get to the far left side of the spectrum. Abolishing the police. That is not a good idea. Let me tell you why. So, you can go ahead, you can call for the abolition of police. Well, who is going to take these calls? If there's violent people out there, people deep into the drug trade. I mean, we can talk about ending the war on drugs and all that, but I don't think that is going to completely take away the black market on drugs and the drug trade. So, how do you expect a community to effectively police and encounter these people, encounter some hardened criminals? That to me is insane. I mean, this honestly kind of sounds like an anarcho-capitalist's wet dream, honestly. Yeah, I mean, the wealthy in society, they don't care. I mean, they will probably hire private security forces. Who will these private security forces be beholden to? Who will they answer to? They're not going to answer to the general public. Probably won't. I mean, not in general, the politicians. They're probably going to be rife with corruption. And you think that they're going to have any better conduct? You really think that? I don't know. I mean, I don't see how you can square this idea and think that this is a good idea. I really don't understand. I mean, I've heard about people talking about, oh yeah, we will have community volunteers, will increase social spending and all that. Well, the problem is, where are you going to get the money for the social spending, for the increased social spending in some of these localities? You have to understand, a lot of the localities that would feel major impacts from the abolition of police are localities that are having problems funding social programs because their economies are gutted. That's going to be an issue, and I feel like you're just going to get further stratification of society if you end up doing this. Because, like I said, I mean, the wealthier people in society will continue to further self-segregate themselves from other people in society. They will hire their own private security forces, which won't be beholden to the public. I just don't see how this will end in a good situation. I think there are some fantasies that there's going to be like a group like the Guardian Angels that are going to come in and clean up the crime in these areas. I mean, the Guardian Angels, they didn't do it by themselves. I mean, they were instrumental in helping to clean up the crime in New York City, so that was awesome, but I mean, there was still the police there, and when you move the police from that situation, you will create a power vacuum. Do you really want to enter the slippery slope? I mean, what next? We talk about getting rid of the fire department. Oh, your house on fire. You want to pay? You want to pay to get it put out? Well, pay up. We'll start putting it out. That's what they did back in the Roman times. They would literally sit there in front of a burning structure and haggle with the person who needed their services, and once the agreement was made, they would start putting out the fire. Yeah, I think this is a very weird argument that is being made from the far left. It's delving deep into the anarcho-capitalist realm. So this is a very weird situation. Yes, I just feel like there has to be some reasonable discussions behind this on both sides, because you have two sides that are failing to see the other side from different perspectives. You have one side that doesn't understand how hard a police officer's job can be, and the fact that when you're under that kind of pressure and you have to make those split-second decisions, it can result in some pretty tragic incidences. And I mean, the fact that some of them are probably overworked and all that is not a good thing as well, and can affect their poor decision making. So we need to talk about definite reform in that area, and need to understand how difficult the job is in being a police officer. I also don't want to let the local politicians off the line, because a lot of the way that the police actually interact with some of these communities, especially poorer communities, is the fact that they're going there to collect fines for the locality, to help fund revenue for the given city. So you will have some mayors of cities, some of them have imposed terrible things. Like, let's talk about, the Eric Garner situation when he was selling loose cigarettes on the sidewalk and was killed as a result of that. That was a situation where you have local policies that are enacting and having the police enforce some of these draconian rules that they come up with. That's one where I don't want to let the local politicians off the hook, because a lot of times they are complicit in this and have helped to exacerbate this problem. There's this article, nyu.edu. It goes on the recent criticism of police departments have been that Some local law enforcement agencies aggressively impose and collect fees, fines, and civilly forfeited assets. In Ferguson, the key driver of the behavior of the police there was the desire to generate municipal revenue by issuing traffic tickets and imposing fees. Now, again, this is something that is very popular with local politicians. So they can't look the other way and act like they weren't complicit in this behavior and then try to throw the local police under the bus for policies that they actually support. So it's just crazy. They feel like the tides are turning in a certain direction and seek to separate themselves from those policies that they would have supported 5 years ago, not even that long ago in some instances. So yeah, I just wanted to discuss that issue of it, to discuss, there's just major need for reform, but also we need to take into account that this is a tough job, and just try to put yourself in, their shoes, not excusing any of the blatant, things that we have seen that is pretty terrible misconduct. But there are some situations that, when you have to deal with that split second decision making, you're not always going to be on top of your game, and you're not always going to make the correct decisions. Yeah, like I said, it's not all black and white. There are definitely areas of gray in this topic to be discussed, and I wanted to get out there and expose that.